Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. The Indian Coast Guard seized 5.5 tons of methamphetamine off the Andaman and Nicobar Islands on Sunday night. Now, this shipment seized from a boat weighed as much as 5 Maruti compact cars, and it's worth 36,000 crores, believe it or not. This is the largest seizure of drugs by any Indian agency. Now, this seizure, importantly, is nearly 2% of all the drugs seized by all enforcement agencies in all of Southeast Asia over the last year. That's in 2023. But these seizures are also in a region where there's chaos. Myanmar is in the grip of civil war for over 2 years. Bangladesh has been unstable for the last few months. Manipur has seen unrest for over 18 months now. Now we know that instability fuels the drug trade, and the drug trade in turn fuels instability. This is the case all over the world, whether it's South America or Afghanistan. But what do these shipments, these very large drug seizures mean for India, which is located at the center of two golden regions, the so-called Golden Crescent and the Golden Triangle, which grow a bulk of the world's narcotics, Afghanistan and Myanmar. Now, reports suggest that the number of drug users in India has reached 292 million. That's nearly 3 crore people. And that's worryingly a 20% increase over the past decade. And this epidemic, this drug epidemic, is being fueled by the easy availability of drugs like crystal meth. Now, joining me to discuss this problem are former Director General of the Coast Guard, Mr. Prabhakaran Palleri, author and journalist Savio Rodriguez, and joining me in the studio is my colleague Deepak Badana. Dr. Palleri, I want to start by asking you this. Firstly, welcome to the News9 Plus show, gentlemen. Dr. Palleri, what is the significance of this drug bust? I mean, the Coast Guard, which you were one of the founding members of, one of the early recruits into the Indian Coast Guard, has done admirably well in this seizure. 5.5 tons of methamphetamine. How significant is this drug bust to your mind?
The Coast Guard has the law charter in its charter, enforcement of maritime law in the ocean terrain. Besides other activities. So as part of this enforcement of law, I will say this is just one of those incidents. Nothing very special according to me, that they did their job of intercepting.
They did their job, Dr. Palleri. It's very good that we have our agencies out at sea, intercepting such historic shipments, such substantially large shipments, 5.5 tons, and it's good to have eyes and ears and agencies out there. But tell us the importance of this massive seizure, that 5.5 tons. Not only for the Coast Guard, but also for the nation, the fact that we are able to intercept such shipments coming out of a very volatile region in Southeast Asia, which I'm actually going to ask Savio about as well. But tell us about the importance of this shipment, this 5.5 tons record seizure.
You see, I can't say that from the point of view of Coast Guard enforcement activities.
Right.
We have been doing it from the day one when we started, and that may not be drugs, but that can be many other violation of law out at sea.
Right.
We started with smuggling, etc., and the drug seizure or drug interdiction is a later development, and I can see that progressively they have been able to home on the drug traffickers,
right,
and get them booked, and it's kind of what the DEA does or Interpol does. But let me tell you, Sandeep, that Interpol has activated their operations, and there was a seizure of 605 tons of drug interdiction all over the Latin American, African, and European countries.
Yes.
So, but for Coast Guard, for India, this is perhaps the largest seizure of synthetic drugs.
Yes.
Ecstasy. That's MDMA is ecstasy, what we call on the street.
Yes.
And it's a big value. It's not just 30,000 crores, but 70,000 it will come in. New York streets.
Right.
But the problem here is this is not like apprehending gold smugglers. It is like it's a different kind of a item which is actually trafficked. But there is no revenue in this. There is a loss of revenue for those who are involved in it. There is no revenue in this for the country, but it has blocked certain activities which would have been connected with insurgency and not just drug business alone. But please understand, according to my way of looking at it or my research findings, drugs, arms, and human trafficking, I call them crimes three. Actually, all these three crimes are the world's largest crimes. Makes a lot of money. It's a transnational organized crime. But what is interesting for me to put it across to you, who is media, is that initially, many years back, I thought these were all single-handed kind of a job. One person or one team is involved, but I found that all the three trafficking, human,
Yes.
drugs, and arms are connected together, and this is
Yes.
organized with big transnational polycrime organizers.
Polycrime organizations, Dr. Paleri, very interesting. And, I've been following your work very closely on that. You've been writing about it for several years. This polycrime, a problem that we are faced with. And Savio, you're another journalist who's been very active in the Northeast. You've traveled to Manipur. And today we have seizures of this size, 36,000 crore. As Dr. Paleri was saying, that 36,000 crore, let me put it in perspective, is more than double what ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, spends in a year. One single shipment is double that of what ISRO spends in a year to send up rockets. Look at the scale of the problem, Savio, that's in the Northeast, and how much of a threat is this for India, given the fact that you have earlier shipments were in kilos. The Coast Guard would intercept shipments in kilos, and today it is in tons. Savio, break it down for us, the importance of this one particular consignment.
When the conflict in Manipur erupted, and I went to Manipur in the first month itself,
right,
and when I came back after our research and investigations, I had put out a statement to the media very categorically stating that the narcotics business in and out of Manipur primarily is estimated to be about 70,000 crore.
Right.
At that point of time, many people were skeptical about the figure that I had put out. We had done some computations, we had analyzed the market out there. Let me give you an understanding of the narcotics market in Manipur and around the area.
Yes.
35% is poppy, which is grown in the hills. Another 12% to 13% is marijuana. But 53% of narcotics moving in and out of Manipur is basically synthetic drugs.
Right.
Now, the synthetic drugs market, the poppy market coupled together with the marijuana market is reportedly around 70,000 crore. This seizure of shipment on a Myanmarese boat is clearly an indication to what numbers I had put out almost 18 months ago when this conflict erupted. I had also very categorically stated at that stage that the conflict in Manipur is being fueled with drug money. Now, why has that happened? That has happened is because the drug production and the drug shipments which were happening out of Myanmar has moved to the Northeast, in particular Manipur. And that is the reason why, and the border areas like even Mizoram for that matter. Now, why has that happened? It's because when the conflict was happening, a lot of people did not have the opportunity to work with the drugs. And, either grow poppy or for that matter, produce synthetic drugs. And therefore, people connected to the drug cartels from the Northeast in India ensured that the drug cartel moved to the Northeast of India. Now, synthetic drugs, I'll give you an interesting insight into the synthetic drugs. The production and the chemicals required for the productions of the synthetic drugs coming out of Manipur is actually coming from Tamil Nadu.
Right. The
So
precursor
the chemicals are shipped from
Yes.
Tamil Nadu,
Right.
and then they come into Manipur via the borders, and then they go to the labs, which are
Right.
predominantly in certain regions which are a part of the valley, and some are moving to the hills right now.
Right.
The point is this:
Yes.
as the learned gentleman earlier said, you have three problems in the Northeast, which is
Yes.
clearly evident. Now, number one is drugs, number two is human trafficking, and
Right.
number three is arms.
Yes.
And all that is happening and being accentuated
Yes.
after the conflict in Myanmar.
Right,
And
absolutely.
therefore, now with Bangladesh being in conflict,
Yes.
you're going to have more such seizures happening, because narcotics
Yes.
is fueling the terrorism that is happening in all parts of the world. Whether
Right.
you look at Hezbollah, whether
Yes.
you look at Hamas, the
Right.
money is coming through narcotics.
Money is coming through narcotics, have you? Well put. And in fact, Deepak, my colleague here, has been looking at the Northeast very closely. He studies Myanmar, of course, the recent crisis in Bangladesh as well. Deepak, you've been looking at this problem in the Northeast. Explain to us what the surge in meth in the region over the last 1 year, what this actually means for the stability. And as Dr. Paleri and of course Savio was saying, the fact that there is a poly crisis there. You have drugs, you have arms shipments, and you have human trafficking. Explain for us the real impact on India's national security because of these three crises coming together, and of course this lucrative trade that the drugs represent for
So
the traffickers.
let me start with some of the trends that we've seen in the narcotics trade in the past 2-3 years.
Right.
This is evident both in the Golden Triangle and
Right.
in the Golden Crescent. So what's happened is that earlier, both these regions were primary suppliers of opium and heroin
Yes.
across the world. Today, you're seeing a shift away from opium towards crystal meth.
Right.
Part of the reason is that the logistics are much simpler. Earlier, the syndicates would have to rely on extensive networks of suppliers who'd go to farms, collect
Yes.
small quantities from different districts.
Right.
Now, it's turned into a very factory-like situation. So you've got a small establishment, you get the precursor chemicals, you
Yes.
get your workers, and in a small, say, 100 square feet room,
Right.
you could veritably, run a cartel from there.
Absolutely, a Breaking Bad formula
Yeah.
in your backyard or in your.
That's insofar as the
Yes.
trends in the narcotics trade is concerned.
Right.
Then there's the nexus between, say, human trafficking, arms trade, and narcotics.
Right.
Now, as has already been established, narcotics is the primary financial driver for
Yes.
every one of these.
Yes, all conflicts are fueled by narcotics.
And when you look at the northeast, particularly Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
you see a number of these syndicates who are indulging in everything from,
Right.
say, wildlife trafficking to
Yes.
the narcotics.
Yes, Dr. Paleri, this point that you made, this poly crisis that we are facing, this combination of human trafficking, arms trafficking, and of course this new upsurge in narcotics, where the UNODC report actually says that, and I'll quote, it says that organized crimes are lowering the production costs and scaling up production by using non-controlled chemicals, the precursor chemicals that Savio mentioned. Now with this scaled up production, shipments involving over 1 ton of drugs have become more frequent, which leads to further price drops as availability and affordability increase. This is from a UNODC report of 2024. Explain for us why this is a big national security challenge for India when you have cheap drugs flooding the market the way they are through Myanmar and of course through the Golden Crescent.
I may have a slightly different view, which perhaps will be useful for you to think further, and all those other two gentlemen also. You see, when I looked into this matter long back when I was studying on national security issues, I found the Golden Triangle, what we call, has got some kind of a traditional background which takes us back to the British Opium War,
Right.
which they introduced opium in Hong Kong and other places
Yes.
with the Chinese, which is it's quite an infamous war. And traditionally, those things stayed back in that particular area, and that's still continuing because there is no proper government for a long time. In fact, Burma was part of the British India. Now, that particular area, especially in the northeast border, which is actually have become part of Golden Triangle, I do not know whether the center of gravity of the Golden Triangle from Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar has shifted to northeast Myanmar border. I do not know that, but I strongly suspect that. Second thing is, in that particular area, it is all plant-based drugs, opium, cannabis, and all kind of a thing. Coca is not very popular in India; it's in Latin America. But the shift to synthetic drugs basically is for ease of transportation. There's an advantage for them. You don't need that much, as the other gentleman has said.
Yes.
It is easy to handle and easy to manufacture.
Right.
And you don't need too many people for that. So they will be sticking to synthetic drugs hereafter, because you can sell it to college student or as
Right.
a paracetamol tablet or anything like that. People won't misunderstand.
Absolutely,
That is the
yes.
convenience is
Yes.
there. The problem which it has got with the national security of
Yeah.
India, yes, it is there, but it is there for every country. You
Right.
start with the Chinese problem, the problem that China had with the British Opium War. That is the same all over, including the United States or any other country you can take up.
Yes.
You see on the west side, on the west part of India, whatever seizure the Coast Guard is having, that was basically heroin and things like that, because they grow opium in the Golden Crescent. But there also is a shift of MDM. So what's happening today is that
Yes.
the plant-based drugs are taking a step backwards, and synthetic chemicals coming in.
Right.
This is all over. And this being a transnational organized polycrime, I will say that the entire United Nations will have to look into it. It's not
Right.
just Interpol alone.
Yes.
So the problem, the threat which we have for our country is more or less similar to other countries also. So it's a international way, international cooperation and coordination we need.
I'm going to ask Savio this. Savio, the Home Minister, particularly Amit Shah, he's declared a war on drugs. Now, as you mentioned, and of course, as Dr. Palleri mentioned, the fact that there is a shift towards synthetic drugs, where it's easier to make it in your in a room, in a small little meth lab, and there are meth labs sprouting across the country. The police will tell you that. But this shift to synthetic is not a very unique Indian problem. It's across the world, and especially in the United States, where you have the US, especially under the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration. He's also put countries like Mexico on the scanner for fentanyl that's being shipped into the United States. Do we need a larger blueprint, Savio, to tackle this problem? Like you mentioned, that it is actually the precursor chemicals are being shipped from India out into these drug labs. They're being used to make the meth, and that meth is now coming into India and damaging our citizens. They're targeting drug users in India, and that's a very big national security threat of the kind that we don't normally see. And that's one reason that I turn to Dr. Palleri and to you, Savio, because you give us a different insight into things. Tell us what really needs to be done now, Savio.
So the Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, has been very clear and very concise and precise on the war against drugs.
Yes.
He has stated at numerous occasions that India will be completely drug-free by 2047.
Right.
Now, in order to do that, if you see the efforts of the government over a period of time, both at a center and certain state governments as well, there has been immense crackdown on narcotics and the supply of narcotics.
Right.
Now, if you look at what happened as a precursor to the conflict in Manipur, it was the crackdown of the government on narcotics that got the people at the background, which is, they've always said it was the High Court order as well as the ethnic conflict that existed. But the crackdown on narcotics was one of the reasons why there was a conflict that erupted in Manipur. Now, what is important to understand? Let's look at the recent seizure itself. You've got 5.5 tons of narcotics seized. Now, 5.5 tons is 5,500 kilograms. 1 kilogram itself is worth 6 crores. In the market. So you're looking at a 28,000, 30,000 drug seizure that has happened, which is only a drop
tip of the iceberg. Yes.
Right? Now, coming back to another important thing which many people don't highlight, that drugs are directly linked to human trafficking, while arms, of course. But if you go to a place like Manipur, let me give you a startling fact. It is not men and women who are the largest number of human trafficked individuals. But children are the largest individuals as far as human trafficking is concerned out of the Northeast.
Right.
And they are going all around, taken to all around the world.
Yes.
That is a serious problem, and the conflict has accentuated
Right.
human trafficking, while it is also, pushing the narcotics business up. And that is the thing we have to look at.
Yes, absolutely. India's war on drugs cannot wait. With the kind of polycrisis that our experts told us, the fact that it's not just the drugs, but it's also human trafficking, it's arms trafficking, and also it has grave implications for India's national security. And that's why we need to look at these shipments in a larger light. We need to look at them holistically, and that's why we have our experts here telling us why India's war on drugs cannot wait any longer. It has to take place on an urgency, on a war footing. But that's all we have time for this evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Paleri, Savio, and of course my colleague Deepak Badana.